In the last few videos, we've talked about how to start and sustain what I call a non-technical rally. That's essentially rallying on the wall and not really worrying so much about the mechanics or the position of the arms and hands. It's really just controlling the racket face to have a rally on the wall. Just very non-technical, just pushing up the back of the ball and just moving your feet to get sideways, pushing the ball. Today I'm going to talk about more of the technical foundations, specifically of the forehand. And I like to start really from what I call position one and skip the ready position. I started doing this most recently because I find that when you start kids in this ready position, the motion from here to pivot and then raise the elbow is a bit awkward for kids. So teaching them the ready position is something that you don't really have to teach them. You just tell them, right? So what I do is I start with the forehand with offhand out, your right hand, your hitting hand, straight out with the racket strings up, slightly down towards the court. Not facing upwards, but just slightly down towards the court. And this is how I like to start juniors and adults for the forehand. There's a couple reasons. We want to start from this high position because we want to be able to use some free energy. And what I mean by free energy is typically the ball is going to go over the net, it's going to bounce, it's going to rise up, then it's going to start falling again, and we need to have a swing path that has an upward trajectory most of the time, okay? So if I have the racket up, it's very easy for me to simply drop and swing up. And I get the use of gravity by my arm falling slightly and my racket tip falling slightly. If I don't start from this upward position, let's say if I go from the ready position and I take the racket back, then I have to stop, and then I have to start back up again, and I have to change directions. In other words, I have to go upwards, and that feels a little bit awkward, where naturally, if I start from this position and I drop my racket and swing up, that's a natural motion. Naturally, if I drop the racket, my body wants to pull it back up. And that's the trajectory, in most cases, that we're going to swing on. The other reason we want to start from this high position, if by chance we don't organize our feet properly and we have a high ball, especially a high ball that's, traveling upwards, we don't want to start from this low position and swing up to a high position. The reason is our palm, when we swing up, our palm goes upwards slightly. So if we are combining a ball that's traveling upwards, a swing trajectory that's going upwards, and a palm that's opening up, guess what? We won't be able to control that ball. It's most likely going to sail out, or if we do hit it, it's just going to be just a push. And just like that, it's going to sail out most cases, so I won't have any control over the ball. So the benefits of starting like this is the position that we want to be in, to be able to create a little loop and then drop the racket and swing upwards for 95% of the balls. But if we have a ball that's high, then we don't drop the racket. We just swing flat. We don't need to drop the racket. If the ball is already well above the net, let's say eye high or above shoulder height, then we can swing a straight horizontal path to the ball and just use gravity to bring it back down. So this is the position I like to start in. And then if you want to, you can just shadow stroke from here, just drop the racket, and then the first position to bring your shoulders forward, which is how I bring the racket forward, is I want to pull my hand this way. So I pull my hand this way, and that pulls my shoulder out of the way, so I can bring this shoulder forward, and then right before impact, my shoulders will slow down, and then that's when my racket will extend outwards. So we want to swing outwards, which is a very natural motion because I'm pulling the racket forward with my shoulders. It's It's a very key point, is that when I start in this position, when I'm sideways, and I pull my arm, my off arm, into my body, that naturally brings my shoulders around, and that starts pulling the racket down, just like this, and then it allows me to launch it outwards on this 45-degree angle. And that's one of the most common mistakes that I see, is that because a lot of students, they don't get their off arm out, they keep it tucked in here, so the shoulder never gets fully turned or closed. So they keep it tucked in here, and there's no motivation to pull this shoulder out of the way, so they just tend to swing this way, and they swing into their body. So they miss that whole 45-degree angle, whereas if I extend my off arm, then I'm going to swing out to this position here by virtue of my shoulders pulling the racket forward. It's just very natural that my arm is going to go out away from my body, out on this 45-degree angle, and then right before contact, my shoulders are going to decelerate. They're going to decelerate, and then my hand is going to go. So if you think about this, the racket into contact is going outwards. Through and after contact, the racket is coming back. So it's like out, in. Out, in. Out, in. So you're throwing the racket outwards, and then you're pulling the racket back in once you reach that point that you can no longer extend out on that 45-degree angle. So those are the key kind of foundational elements of what I would call a modern forehand. Now obviously there's some things that are going on with the wrist, called this wrist extension, when you start pulling the shoulder out of the way and the racket lays back, the wrist extends slightly more. When you pull the shoulders around and you get to the point where that arm can no longer extend on that 45-degree angle, you start losing a little bit of that wrist extension, and the racket starts catching up to the hand. Into contact, the racket is going to be behind the handle, but right as you get into contact, because I can't infinitely extend out on a 45-degree angle, once I start reaching that point that my arm can't extend any longer and my shoulders have decelerated, then I'm going to lose a little bit of this extension, and my wrist is going to start closing the racket for me. So after contact, I should be in a slight wrist flexion position. So this is extension. I'll be extension into contact. Right before contact, I'll start losing that extension and get to a relatively neutral wrist position. And then right after contact, I might be in a slight flex position, only because I want to keep my forearm muscles pretty relaxed during this swing. If they're very tight, then I won't be able to control the racket face quite as well through contact. I want to have a little bit of extension happening into contact, losing some of that extension, and then maybe slight flexion after contact. And then from there, you'll just need to be able to feel the racket face angle and understand, what is too open, what is closed. But in general terms, we want the racket face opening into contact. What that means is, as my strings are facing down, as I pull to contact, my palm will move more in a vertical position. So my palm will open the racket face slightly into contact, and then it will close after. What we don't want to see is the palm opening here and closing into contact. And I don't want to get into the technical nuances of why we don't want to do that, but let's just say that if you are in a closed racket face position during the preload and the movement into contact and you're opening, it's going to be a little bit more consistent to control the racket face angle. So I think those are most of the elements of what I call the modern forehand. And again, I like to start from this position, and if you want to just come out to a wall, You can just start in this position, drop, swing. Drop, swing. And I think you can actually, learn the elements of the modern forehand really out here on the wall, but I like to start from this position just so we can feel that loop naturally happening, and then you can add in from the start. You can start from the ready position and then do the pivot, drop and swing.